you think you know 80s movie stars? Think again. The true icons of that era weren't just on the big screen, they were on the VHS shelves, dominating late-night rentals and becoming legends for an audience hungry for something different. I'll show you the actresses who appeared in more cult movies than anyone else, how they built powerful careers, and why they're still worshipped by fans today. These are the forgotten stories of the women who didn't just star in movies. They owned a kingdom of their own. In the 1980s, Hollywood blockbusters dominated the box office, but in living rooms around the world, a revolution was underway. For the first time in history, films weren't confined to theaters. They were coming home, on VHS. The video rental store became a sanctuary. Endless rows of colorful, outrageous covers promised forbidden thrills, late-night scares, and guilty pleasures. For every Top Gun or Back to the Future, there were hundreds of low-budget tapes, waiting for curious hands to pluck them from the shelf. And on those covers, a new kind of royalty emerged. Women who weren't chasing Oscars, but were creating legends. They were bold, sexy, fearless, and unforgettable. They became the queens of cult cinema, actresses who made straight-to-video a kingdom of its own. To understand the queens of VHS, you have to understand the world they ruled. Picture it: the neon lights of a rental store, the smell of plastic cases, teenagers debating which tape to take home for a sleepover, parents sneaking glances at the adults-only shelf. In this world, box art was everything. A lurid painting of a chainsaw-wielding maniac, a woman in leather wielding a sword, a screaming face trapped in neon colors. It didn't matter if the movie cost a fraction of a Hollywood blockbuster. The covers sold the fantasy. And more often than not, that fantasy revolved around the women who brought these wild stories to life. Lucinda Dickey. In the early 80s, breakdancing was everywhere, and at the heart of it all was Lucinda Dickey. As Kelly in Breakin', Lucinda embodied the crossover of classical dance and street culture. She was elegance meeting raw energy, instantly iconic. But it was Ninja 3, the domination that transformed her into a legend. Half martial arts movie, half horror, half soda commercial. It made no sense, but somehow, Lucinda made it unforgettable. She was the VHS dream girl, tough, beautiful, and always ready to move. Her career was brief, but her impact permanent, living on through cult screenings, parodies, and endless meme culture. She didn't just star in B-movies, she moved through them like a neon ghost. Sybil Danning. Where Lucinda moved, Sybil Danning commanded. With her Austrian accent, statuesque figure, and fearless performances, Sybil dominated the screen. She was a warrior queen in fantasy epics, a ruthless villain in sci-fi, and a leather-clad goddess in biker flicks. But Sybil wasn't just an actress. She was a businesswoman, producing films, founding companies, and shaping her career on her own terms. Her infamous topless moment in Howling 2 wasn't just exploitation. It was Sybil turning the male gaze into her own weapon. She fed audiences exactly what they wanted, while proving she was always in control. She wasn't just a VHS queen, she was VHS royalty. Barbara Crampton. While Sybil Danning ruled with authority, Barbara Crampton ruled with intelligence. In Reanimator, she endured some of the wildest scenes in horror history. But through the madness, she grounded the story with heart and humanity. From Chopping Mall to From Beyond, Barbara wasn't just a scream queen. She was a performer who elevated every B-movie she touched. And decades later, she returned, stronger than ever, producing and starring in acclaimed modern horror. Barbara proved that scream queens could evolve. They weren't just victims. They were survivors. thinkers, and leaders. Lineay Quigley. Lineay Quigley didn't play by anyone's rules. She was punk, spiky, and unforgettable. Her role as Trash in Return of the Living Dead wasn't just a performance, it was a statement. She built a career on chaos, out-screaming, out-acting, and outlasting scripts that barely kept up with her energy. From Night of the Demons to Hollywood chainsaw hookers, Lineay turned low-budget sets into cult shrines. But more importantly, she embraced her fans. Through conventions, workout tapes, and her horror rock band, she became more than a star. She became a movement. Brinke Stevens. While Lineay Quigley was loud and chaotic, Brinke Stevens was subtle and haunting. She wasn't the girl who shouted, she was the one who whispered. And somehow, that was even scarier. A marine biologist before she was an actress, Brinke brought intelligence and curiosity to every role. In Slumber Party Massacre, she wasn't just another victim. She was vulnerability and terror personified. Later, in Nightmare Sisters, she showed her range, transforming from a bookish wallflower to a seductive demon. Brinke did something rare. She narrated her own cult career in real time, writing columns and sharing insights with fans. She was more than a scream queen. She was a storyteller, ensuring her VHS presence was felt both on and off screen. Julie Strain. Some actresses fit into cult cinema. Julie Strain was cult cinema. At 6'1", with flowing dark hair and a body that looked ripped from a comic book panel, she dominated every frame. Her career spanned over 100 films, most of them wild mashups of sci-fi, fantasy, and erotic action. But what set Julie apart was her self-awareness. She didn't just play the fantasy, she was the fantasy, leaning into exaggeration until it became her brand. From Heavy Metal 2000 to endless VHS action romps, Julie ruled a kingdom of excess. She wasn't looking for crossover success. She built her own empire, one where the guns were big, the armor was small, and the attitude was even bigger. Michelle Bauer. Where Julie Strain was epic, Michelle Bauer was campy fun. She was the wink at the camera, the reminder that cult cinema didn't have to be serious to be unforgettable. With films like Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers and The Tomb, Michelle leaned into the absurdity. She knew the budgets were low and the scripts were outrageous, but that was the magic. She turned silliness into charisma, becoming one of the most beloved cult actresses of the VHS era. Together with Lineay Quigley and Brinke Stevens, Michelle formed an unofficial Trinity of Terror, a trio of scream queens who reigned over 80s horror and never lost their devoted fans. Monique Gabrielle. Monique Gabrielle looked like a classic pin-up, but she had a secret weapon: comedy. In Deathstalker 2, she played both the tough heroine and the ditzy villain, often in the same scene. Her timing was perfect, her self-awareness sharper than the swords she carried. From Bachelor Party to a string of direct-to-video comedies, Monique brought playful energy to every role. She wasn't just a beauty on the VHS shelf. She was a performer who turned parody into power, always ready to laugh at the absurdity and take the audience with her. Shannon Whirry. As the VHS market shifted into the 1990s, the tone changed. Outrageous horror and fantasy gave way to sleek thrillers and steamy mysteries. And at the center of it all was Shannon Whirry. Her roles in Animal Instincts and Private Obsession defined the late-night erotic thriller. With her controlled voice, commanding presence, and undeniable allure, Shannon was less scream queen, more femme fatale. She represented the VHS evolution, from campy excess to neo-noir shadows. Where the 80s gave us outrageous cult queens, Shannon gave us a cooler, darker kind of seduction, proving the VHS siren was alive and well in a new decade. Tracy Lords. Tracy Lords may be the most infamous name in VHS history. After a scandalous start in the adult industry, she reinvented herself in cult and mainstream cinema. In Not of This Earth and Crybaby, she showcased charisma, wit, and range, refusing to let her past define her. Later, she stunned audiences with appearances in Blade and countless cult TV roles. Tracy wasn't just a survivor of controversy, she was a reinvention artist. She turned infamy into cult royalty, proving that even scandal could become a VHS legend. Deborah Dutch. Deborah Dutch was a living VHS fantasy. With sword in hand and leather-clad confidence, she embodied the pulp heroines of the era. Her roles in action-packed horror and fantasy films gave her a cult following, but it was her warrior persona that fans remember most. Long before cosplay queens dominated conventions, Deborah was bringing that same energy to the VHS world, making her one of the most enduring warrior women of the era. Dawn Wildsmith. Every VHS queen brought something unique. For Dawn Wildsmith, it was punk energy. With spiky hair, sarcastic wit, and a rebellious presence, she became a fixture of cult films through her work with director Fred Olen Ray. She wasn't just another actress. She was the girl who looked like she belonged at the rock show before the movie screening. Dawn made VHS horror feel raw, unpolished, and alive. Monique Parent. If Shannon Whirry was the icy femme fatale, Monique Parent was the fiery seductress. With her striking red hair and commanding presence, she became a defining face of 90s erotic thrillers. Nicknamed the thinking man's sex symbol, Monique wasn't just alluring, she was articulate and clever, often poking fun at her own reputation. She embodied the sophisticated, sultry edge of late-night VHS cinema. Julie K. Smith. Julie K. Smith brought Playboy glamour to VHS camp. With a mix of innocence and daring, she became a staple of erotic comedies and sci-fi thrillers in the 1990s. Her roles were often tongue-in-cheek, embracing the absurdity of the material. Fans loved her for it, cementing her place alongside Shannon Whirry and Monique Parent as one of the defining late-night stars of the VHS shelf. While some of these actresses may not be household names, their legacy is powerful and enduring. They laid the groundwork for a new type of horror celebrity, one who is celebrated for their devotion to the genre. They proved that a career in cult films could be just as meaningful as one in mainstream Hollywood. They became fixtures at horror conventions, where fans still line up to get their VHS covers signed, sharing stories and celebrating the films that shaped their youth. The cult movie boom wasn't just an American phenomenon. Across the globe, similar icons were emerging, becoming queens in their own right. In Italy, Lamberto Bava's Demons introduced audiences to the fiery presence of Paola Cozzo. With her punk haircut and defiant attitude, she became the ultimate final girl, battling creatures in a movie theater. Across the sea, the UK gave us Claire Higgins as the chilling Julia Cotton in Hellraiser, a performance so terrifying and iconic it transcended the genre. In France, Béatrice Dalle was the unforgettable wild child in Betty Blue, a role that made her an icon of rebellious European cinema. These international queens proved that the spirit of low-budget, high-impact filmmaking was universal, and the box art on shelves from Rome to London promised a different kind of thrill. Many of these cult queens were not just actresses, but muses for the directors they worked with. Lineay Quigley, Michelle Bauer, and Dawn Wildsmith all had a long and fruitful partnership with director Fred Olen Ray. His films, often made on shoestring budgets, were a playground for their over-the-top, charismatic performances. Similarly, Barbara Crampton's career is forever tied to the visionary work of Stuart Gordon and Brian Usna. These directors created worlds where the bizarre and the theatrical could thrive, and they found in these actresses the perfect partners to bring those visions to life. This special relationship between director and muse helped create the consistency and beloved chaos that defined the genre. What made these women legends wasn't just their films, it was the fans. VHS collectors traded tapes, horror conventions celebrated scream queens, and underground magazines chronicled their every move. These actresses weren't out of reach like Hollywood stars. They signed autographs, connected with fans, and often laughed at the movies they made right alongside the people who loved them. They weren't just stars, they were part of the community. In an age before streaming, before instant downloads, there was the ritual of the VHS tape. And on those shelves, these women reigned supreme. They weren't given big budgets or mainstream respect, but they didn't need it. They became legends in the aisles of video rental stores, in the glow of late-night TV marathons, and in the hearts of the fans who still cherish them today. From scream queens to fantasy warriors, pin-up comedians to neo-noir sirens, they gave the VHS era its pulse, its chaos, and its charm. The queens of cult cinema didn't just star in B-movies. They turned them into something bigger, a legacy that lives on, one rewound tape at a time.